everyone, and thank you for taking the time to come here. Can you imagine a police force where you're not just using your intuition to estimate what is going to happen next? When you think about artificial intelligence, what comes to mind? What is something that you think it's about from what you've heard? Anyone in the audience, what do you think it is? I could call names as well, so is idea raise your hand, or I call you by your name?
Something that is not real.
Okay. So something that is not real. One more response. Any others? No? Yes? No? Okay. So artificial intelligence is the ability of a computer to function to some degree like a human being. As we know, human beings can sense things, they can reason, they could even be a bit creative. Could you imagine a computer having a power to do these areas on its own? We have computers being able to sense, reason, act, and adapt. That implies that artificial intelligence is almost as if you're creating a human being. But the question is, who's solving who? Are you solving the artificial intelligence, or is it solving you? When we look at the world of artificial intelligence, I have here a diagram that demonstrates different areas of artificial intelligence. We stretch from the general tone, which is dealing with sensing technology and the like, to machine learning, and then something known as neural network. And then from neural network, we have deep learning and then generative AI. So some examples of machine learning would be things spam. When your emails go into spam, it would automatically filter what is what. With neural networks, this is mostly used for scientific research and also, for example, in sports. If they want to see where, for example, a ball went to track it back, they could use neural networks in order to make these connections. In addition to that, deep learning, it goes a bit deeper. It's like a layer in a cake. It allows a computer to do more complex tasks, greater efficiency, but with less human input. And then finally, we have generative AI, where you have things like Google Bard, ChatGPT, and the like, which is a whole different level where you use large language models to assess, analyze, and you could extract things from it. Okay, so with that said, artificial intelligence could be divided into two main or big categories. The first one is known as narrow AI or ANI, and the other one is general artificial intelligence. So I'm not too sure how many of you have watched the movie Star Wars before, or if you're a fan of that. We have two robots inside there. One is R2-D2, which is the small robot, and then the bigger one, which is 3CPU. Now, narrow AI is what is available to the public. This is artificial intelligence that is designed for a specific task. So for example, in computer vision, you may have facial recognition or even pattern recognition to determine if a crime was done by a certain person. And it could also be done for voice recognition. So if I say, hey Google, your phone will recognize the pattern of your voice. These are examples of narrow AI. General AI, on the other hand, is a more complex and a bit, I would say, even scary. Presently, the capacity at which the AI community is functioning, they have not even begun to really scratch general AI. General AI is the ability for a computer to adapt on its own without human intervention. So it's like when a baby is born and grow up in life and it mature and evolve, general AI is able to do all of this on its own without any input from humans. Could you begin to fathom that? Let's think about that a little more. Imagine that you have two kids. One of them came up to be good and everything that you expected, and the other one deviated from what you wanted. Imagine a computer with those same two directions. One could be very useful to society and the other one destructive. But at the end of the day, something we need to consider is that artificial intelligence is a tool at this point. Okay. So with two examples that I mentioned above with R3PO and R2D2, these are two models of narrow artificial intelligence and general artificial intelligence. With R2D2 being an example of general intelligence, it's able to have its own emotions, think creatively in different situations, and adapt to change. Where 3CPO is more of a language model, it's able to translate and follow certain protocols. So the avenue of artificial intelligence that we're presently looking in this discussion is narrow artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence used for a specific task. If you haven't figured it out yet, data is a major component of artificial intelligence. Because without data, you do not have a source for the algorithm to be trained on for specific things. So most artificial intelligence algorithms, they're more of an export system. So if you collaborate someone with a certain expertise, you could design it to identify different things and complete certain tasks. So data is raw. It's like going on the beach and you see sand all over. But information is if you go on the beach and then you say, okay, I'm looking for shells on the beach, and then you see a shell and you take out the shell. So it's distinguishing between just a whole lot of sand and specific things that you could use inside. So with that said, let's look at machine learning. Machine learning is used for things such as computer vision, whereby you could estimate the size of an object or even to some degree make predictions on what would happen next. But this is still on a superficial level. So some of the ways in which it could be used with machine learning is that it could be used to check different things. So if, for example, you want to do a search on Google and you type in a certain information, it's checking to see if that information is the same as what is inside the database. Classification, on the other hand, is, for example, with fingerprints. Each person's fingerprint is not the same. So this implies if you have an algorithm that is trained correctly, it could distinguish between your fingerprint and someone else without the need for large forensic lab. With that said, as I mentioned before, prediction. Prediction could be done, for example, on a country electricity bill. It fluctuates over time. But for you to know next year or even in the next 2 or 3 years how much it would fluctuate by, these prediction models could be used to do that, so that, for example, engineers could make modifications to certain systems. Now, with the theory and fundamental links to policing, there's a case study here by McKinsey and Company. It was able to allow people to commute within these large areas, reduce their commuting time by 15 minutes. So, although we have moved away from traffic lights in St. Vincent, it doesn't imply that artificial intelligence cannot be used inside the traffic department. For example, if somebody is a repeated offender, you could check back through the database to say, okay, maybe this penalty may not be the most effective. Maybe I could do something else and see how it would venture over time. So, with that said, 75 out of 176 countries in 2019 actively use artificial intelligence for surveillance purposes. Exploring the visualization of data. This would connect to something that was mentioned by Baptiste in an interview, that he mentioned that you could map where certain incidents are occurring. So it's not only about mapping burglaries, you could also map sexual offenses, persons who commit certain types of offenses. They would follow a certain pattern. So although it may sound as if we're minimizing human beings to routine tasks like robots, To some degree, and I'm not sure how many of you would feel uncomfortable about this, but we do have routine tasks that we go out through the day. For example, we wake up, we go to work, we come back home. That is a system. And that could also have a certain predictive measure inside of it. The potential application in the police force, it could be best demonstrated by an app that was first developed in Sweden and then adopted in another European country, whereby they used an application called SafeLand in order to use neighborhood watch groups to help with predictive policing. So instead of only relying on data that people report, they gave persons the opportunity to state inside the app something that they notice, and it's filtered through a station to make estimates on when a crime may occur next. This could affect areas such as border protection through embedded systems. Inside the port system for St. Vincent, we may not have the most complex or sophisticated equipment, but it doesn't imply that it cannot be improved to a level that we could restrict firearms from coming into the country in-house instead of relying on machinery overseas. It just means that the research papers that is appropriate to that field, information could be extracted and then a system developed to say, okay, if a gun is inside here and I have, for example, a metal detector, it could, my foresight is that it could be programmed that it could estimate if it's simply canned food or a firearm based on the type of reading that it gets. So it's like sound, it's frequency. You know, some things are high, some things are low, but then you could map what is actually inside of it without actually going into the barrel to see what it is. So these are some areas that artificial intelligence could be used. But this area would more go into deep learning, whereby it uses neural networks or connected layers of programs so that it could filter what features and classify what something is without actually seeing it, just using the reading from the sensor. Another area it could look into is looking at it from health assessment and analysis. So the police force doesn't have one type of customer. Some of us may think that the only person that we serve is the public. But the police force also have an internal customer, which are its members. So although some people may come to the station and make outlandish statements that, oh, my tax money doing this and that, that is not the reality. Because you need to have a balance between internal organization for it to function effectively to affect the outside world. So artificial intelligence, which could be linked to, for example, a smartwatch, it may seem simple, but something like this could be purchased on bulk for as low as $5 EC to the organization, and it could allow things such as intercom, even biometric reading, so that you could make an assessment depending on the model that you use if someone would have a potential health risk, so they could look out for some things in the future. And that could be relayed to the human resource department and say, okay, we noticed we had an alert, so we recommend that you go see the doctor to check out these issues. So it's going beyond simply, oh, how could I fight this crime, but how could I take care of our people? There is an area that I would like us to consider in a bit more depth, which is known as a large language model. A large language model uses large amount of text, handwritten data, and the like. And from there you can extract or even generate certain data. Examples of technology or websites that use large language models would be things such as Google Bard, ChatGPT. They use information from the internet, vast amount of information, and train these algorithms. And from there you can extract certain details. But the problem is that unless you are a prompt engineer, which is another field of artificial intelligence, you do not know how to effectively filter through this information. So if you have a case file, for example, instead of you simply writing out that case file to say word for word, oh, I need to type this on the computer, computer vision could be used to analyze that text and then convert it into a computer-generated text for you to make modifications on top of it. In fact, this is a final project that I worked on during my program, and the effectiveness of this is that it implies that if there are files, say stretching 50 or so years before that were unsolved, if it's stored inside a large language model, it gives you the ability to track back to say, okay, we have a hint, this person may be a hit, this person may have committed this offense a couple of years back. Where can we find him in order for justice to be solved? But this also implies that the laws of the country also need to facilitate this process. Now, looking at strategy for the implementation of it, attitude is a key component when it comes to anything. Because unless you have the right attitude, nothing would be done. When we speak about attitude, establishing clear objectives of what we want to do inside specific areas. We know that each department have challenges or hurdles we're trying to overcome. So can we tailor certain technologies to address these challenges through the use of artificial intelligence? So for example, inside a public relations department, you regularly post press release on social media. That could actually be complemented through the use of a prompt system and also linking to links between the department, whereby, for example, when the morning report is received, it could automatically generate what is necessary for you to post online without sitting down on the task of filtering and saying, okay, how should I say this? Or if it's something very, for the lack of a better word, you could have recommendations on ways in which you could say this in a more approachable way. Because the key thing about communication, it's not about just talking, it's about being able to communicate effectively. Another thing that is very important for us to look at when it comes to this implementation of a strategy for AI is looking at a return on investment. Artificial intelligence technology is not cheap, but it doesn't imply that the benefits are more than what you would put in. So for example, a computer that has a GPU processor, which allows you to train these AI models. It could run, this price is not bad, but it could just cost you probably 2,000 or so US dollars, and it could even venture up to probably 4,500 US or so. But when you actually look at what it's capable of doing, especially if you have the right business strategy inside the organization, first, it could be tested. Then you say, okay, maybe we could venture this out into products that we could use inside other areas of the RSS to say, okay, St. Vincent has developed this model. If you want to use our model, let's talk. But it could also be that if you want to have certain things done, for example, if we want some forensic analysis done, there could be a bartering or trading whereby we could use this as leverage in order to get certain things in place. With that said, when we look at artificial intelligence technology, it's a field that has been around for over 60 years. The only reason it's really catching up to speed now is because of the use of the graphics processing unit, which assisted greatly in handling these large amounts of data. And persons, well, as an organization, we need to be trained in how to use these tools that have been developed, as well as know what tools are necessary for the organization, because you cannot do everything. But what is the critical things that need to be done? As mentioned before, the laws need to be very supportive in order to allow artificial intelligence technology to be used in areas such as the court system. Because when we do, for example, recover fingerprints, there's a system in place whereby although the computer makes a hit or match, there's still other steps whereby it needs to be second checked by two other experts to make sure that it is correct and verified. So, with that said, the laws need to be developed to allow artificial intelligence technology programs to be used in a court to say, okay, it is reliable. Because programs could be trained to have at least, well, if a program is trained to have between 90 to 100% is not very likely, but say 92, 95 or 90 to 98% degree of error, that's pretty good. That's better than what most humans could perform for a large data set. Another key point that I want you to consider is that collaboration is very important, because it can't just be one government ministry doing this entire task. We need to have a collaboration between different government agencies, because at the end of the day, everything is interconnected in some way. And some of the phases that you could consider is to first have a pilot program of say, okay, we have an idea. We think that this task needs to be done. Let's test it on a smaller scale. Then we develop it into a full-scale implementation instead of simply saying, okay, this is the problem, let's immediately put it out. But testing and then verifying is a very critical step when it comes to AI implementation. And also that feedback loop. Hearing what persons in the organization are saying, persons in the public, before it's scaled on a larger. Now, data privacy and security. How many of you know that each time you search on the net, corporations are paying for your data to see what products to recommend to you? In fact, when you are training AI systems, where do you think you get the data from? The internet. So you could extract all that information, train your model on certain things. But in the context of St. Vincent, what laws are in place to say, okay, you cannot use my personal data? Sergeant Choi, with the Cybersecurity Act, or laws, are there anything in place to say that we cannot?
Not at this time.
So do you think that is worrying? Oh. So imagine these large corporations overseas using your data in order to to exploit you for them to get profits. And even what's worse than that, the idea of these large corporations developing products, then selling it back to you using your own data. So the point of artificial intelligence inside the police force is to change that business model. So instead of we simply being the recipient of the products that they have taken from us, we are the producers and then sell it back to them. And a cost assessment of AI implementation, which I mentioned before, but cost, I want you to consider that cost is not only money. Cost is not only money at all. Cost is also time. Time is something that you cannot give somebody back. As much as you like to say, okay, I'll give you back this time, the value of the time changes. And also manpower. What human resource are you willing to put in place to develop these systems over time? Because these projects are not just a 1 day or 2 day project. They take stages of development. Especially in artificial intelligence, when it comes to programming these things and really getting it to work, there's some areas that are gray areas, which is unsupervised learning. The computer is learning, and even the top professionals
inside these areas do not know why.
I've created about 3 scenarios for discussion, and this is how we're going to approach it. I'm going to put you in tiers. One side would be positive responses, the other side would be negative responses. To see if you could find out any ways in which artificial intelligence could be used for identification. So this side would be looking at positive, this side would be looking at negatives. You could just think about it. Then, behind, we would be having artificial intelligence used for documentation. See if you could find ways in which it's used for documentation. So positive and then negative ways. And then in the third tier, which would be more in the back, we will be looking at how could artificial intelligence be used for integration or creative linkages. I'm just going to give you probably 2 minutes or so to just think about that. You can have a short discussion, and then from there, I'm going to hear your feedback. Healthcare system. That doctors use computers in order to log in your details. National insurance card. And on this card, it has all your details about whatever hospitals you visited, what kind of illnesses you have. So that, yes, on this one card. So it implies that when you go to a doctor and they put in this card into the system to see, they understand your medical history better than you do. So, what do you think is a negative about someone having that much access to your data? Anyone? Yes.
It's a positive. It's a possibility of blackmail if somebody get that kind of data.
Yeah, precisely. Okay, now the next area, section 2, is looking at documentation. How do you think artificial intelligence could be used for documentation? Anyone in the audience is fine. To document something. Security, okay. Could you tell me more?
It's like in the event of cybercrime, they prevent you from like threats online and so forth.
So documenting if it's you or not, of the travel. Okay. Any negatives about documentation? Okay, let me give you a negative about documentation. Looking at fraud. Your privacy, it goes into your data privacy. Who has access to that documentation and what are they using it for? Another area that we'll be looking at is identification. How do you think artificial intelligence can be used for identification? Anyone? Yes?
Voice scanning or facial recognition.
Good. Voice scanning, facial recognition. So this implies also, if we have this system in place by next year, or probably in the next 2 years, whereby persons will be given national quote-unquote ID card, which will be with you from birth, so that if something happens to you within that period of time, it will be all on top of that card. It's not something that you're simply issued at 18. If you have this kind of identification, if somebody, for example, God forbid, at this moment, wash up on the shores of Saint Vincent and they're Vincentian, and the network is trained to see, okay, this person have these sort of features, it could lead to fast identification of these persons. Yes?
It's just 30 minutes uses see, this is my card for
Exactly. Yes. Okay. Yes, someone else?
Question: is it possible that if once you have a sort of these cards from board, right? Is it possible that they might switch to embedded cards?
They could. Okay. So with that embedded systems, there are 2 approaches that's coming to mind with this card. One, you could have a chip inside of it that it would scan and read the chip to say, okay, these are the details on top of it. Or it could use computer vision, whereby it scans certain marks on top of it and then it links it to a database instead of the information being embedded on the card. That is an approach. So you don't always need to have a chip in something for it to work as a device. You could use different type of technologies. Barcode as well. Like even with the barcode is a sequence of numbers, but with the computer vision, it literally identifies what the card is and then matches it with what you have inside your database.
What if the card itself is not card, just chip embedded in your wrist? It's just an idea. It's an idea.
What I would tell you what I would tell you about that is something that my dad told me. My dad used to work inside the Royal Air Force, and he mentioned that the technology that is released to the public is usually 20 to 25 years behind what they're using. So when you speak about these chips, I'm not surprised it's already being used. But inside, as I alluded to before, a smaller sample. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a demonstration, but in two different ways, okay? So the first one is, how many of you have access to Wi-Fi or data at this time? Everyone? Good. So, I want you to, okay, if you have an object next to you, whether it be a bottle, a pen, or something like that, see if you could go to Google in the search settings and you see the search option by the side. Where's the camera settings? This is the option using computer vision. And when you search that object, you would notice that Google would identify what it is and even what company it is and give you options of different links to similar products. This is an example of computer vision using as a search engine. So how could this be used inside your everyday policing or your lives? If you go out on an accident scene, for example, and you're wondering what model of car is this, I can't remember, you could simply take a photo of that using the same algorithm to identify what vehicle it is, what year it was designed. So it speeds up your investigation time and the like. Okay? It could also be used in other ways to see what similarities are there between two things. Or even recommend ways in which you could fix something by simply taking a photo of it and extracting the details. Another way that I'm going to show you of how computer vision could be used is using something known as photogrammetry. So photogrammetry is using light in order to measure the distance of something. So what does this imply? It implies now that instead of you simply taking a photograph and then it gives you a flat 2D image, we could even take it a step further, whereby it can give you a 3-dimensional image. So I'm going to demonstrate to you, and then I'll explain to you how it works after. Alright, so I'm going to walk around and do a quick scan, and then I would just show you my phone afterwards. Okay? My phone is sealed. You see the patterns on the floor. See? And then scan. Map in the room. So I would walk around so that you could see. That's the mapping flow. So this implies that now, instead of you taking a picture of a house, and then you have to take several other pictures of the house to understand what the house is like, you could actually use the VR glasses, generate the model of the house, and then revisit the scene. But this is a publicly available level of photogrammetry. There are other levels of it. So the way in which this works is that it transfers the photos that you're taking, series of photos after mapping, and then it sends it to its server. Then the algorithm arranges the images in order to generate the scene. Then it sends it back to you, and then it compiles it. So this implies that on your cell phone, instead of having very sophisticated devices, applications could be created, and then it's linked to another computer whereby you could generate certain evidence. For example, instead of simply walking with a cutlass or a gun that you retrieve from a scene, you could create a 3D model of it to full scale, and it reduced storage space. And it could even be sent overseas for them to look at the model to retrieve certain things. So this is a direction in which the police force can go. But the question is, who would get there first? A possible timeline of how I could see things evolving, if things are properly done in place, is that we could re-envision the police force in the context of the RSS, because we don't exist in isolation. What are some of the things that you think would be necessary for us to focus on? Some key problems using artificial intelligence. And then when we have that, we develop these target areas that have the most strain. We could take about 2 to 3 years. Then from there, in 2017, these laws could be these projects could be complemented by laws. So when it goes through the justice system, they say, okay, these are the certain measures you have to take in order to have this done properly. And then probably by 2032, we could look at a more return on investment. Since we really want to develop these technology, how then could we get a return on our investment? Okay? Another approach to a timeline is that we could simply update equipment based on persons overseas telling us, okay, we have this technology, we think that it would be good for you, this is how it would benefit, and then we simply buy into products that is marketed to us. And then we go through some training proposals and get offers, so it's just a cycle, but without you actually creating. One of the things, let me not go into that, but one of the areas that really distinguishes a developed country from developing country is the human resource. So if the human resource is utilized effectively, you would see strides inside that country. But if it's not utilized, you would wonder what's happening. Because most of these developed countries, they don't have much natural resources. It's a human resource that they utilize in order to build the country. Oh, and as you notice, in 2027, it's unknown, because I'm not sure how far ahead the projection is of when plans are implemented. Okay. So when we look at the financial projections, I made it my business to tell you in the beginning that when you think of finance, do not only think about money. You also need to think about time and manpower. Also, what is the expenses for a specific project? Because everything cannot be done. Then when we look at profit, we look at the market demand for certain things. And finally, the stakeholders would not be the Royal Saint Vincent Grenadines Police Force, but it's also the people of Saint Vincent, and by extension the region and the world. So the things that we do is not just a drop in the pond, it's affecting things much bigger than that. Because if we think of ourselves as small, we remain small. But look at the British Empire. How many persons use English? So with that said, in this presentation, I looked at some general concepts of AI so that you have a better understanding of it. Then we evaluated some case studies and then strategies. And then from there, I did some demonstrations. And then finally, we ended with a projection. So now, do you have any questions that you'd like to discuss? Okay. Yes.
My question is, how receptive, is the executive branch of the organization to, these suggestions or potential implementation of these suggestions?
Well, I'm aware that presently they have a labor agency meeting, so this aspect of it has not been discussed. But ideally, there were some other persons who were supposed to be here, but I'm aware that they also had to travel overseas. So situation did not allow that. So in terms of the receptiveness, it's still to be seen. I cannot comment.
I have another question. Very, very wonderful and informative presentation, right? But I want to ask a personal question. With the knowledge that you have, right, of the positives and the negatives of artificial intelligence, how would you feel personally, considering how we operate now? How would you feel living in a country like Saint Vincent, with those things implemented? Considering that there's not the legislative support and so forth, how would you feel if those things come into play now as it is?
Saint Vincent has a lot. From my perspective, Saint Vincent have a lot of potential. It's just for it to be harvested. So, on my personal note, I know how to use myself. So, if the organization does not want to implement these, I already have my business model of my company that I could develop, and already written a detailed business plan with 10 years in mind that I could use it. So this is an opportunity for the organization to benefit not only, when I speak about the organization, I'm speaking about all its members. And I think it's very something that would benefit not only my generation, but things to come. Yes?
I have a question. My mirror part of our next question. My question is, how do you feel as an individual who attains such skill and who is here to deliver on such important topic moving forward in a modernized era? Looking at the audience, I do really see no top brass.
No, they have meeting.
Yeah. Yes, they have an emergency meeting. I'm aware of that. But given the circumstances, I completely understand. But yeah. So my hope is that I could also deliver this presentation to them as well, to gather the perspectives. Because we have limited resources. As you know, for the past probably 2 or 3 years, the police force has not expanded, it has shrunk. So we need to take that into context. How could artificial intelligence complement the police officers that are here? Because this is actually a support system. With artificial intelligence, persons could function beyond their present capacity. It's augmenting what you could do.
If this is to be implemented in our system, Parliament has to pass a law.
At certain stages, but for the developmental stage, Parliament don't need to even get involved. It's for the organization to develop, to understand what direction it wants to do, what skills it wants to target. But when it comes to integrating ministries and then the incorporation inside the actual court system, these things will take Parliament. Yes.
As we reinforce second, third industrial revolution, do you think with the implementation of the AI system, it will negate the need for more human resources? And how will this affect the general population in terms of employment?
Okay, good. I'm happy that you mentioned that. Because if we look at history for the past 500 years, all of us are victims of slavery from some degree. We were descendants of yes, of unpaid workers. Someone was benefiting, but then it transitioned into machinery replacing. So when you think that, should I go into that? Slavery was only because of goodwill. It was also because of technology.
It was unprofitable.
Yes.
Lack of technology.
You know, it was no longer profitable. Exactly. So let's fast track now to this present time. There may be a fear that artificial intelligence may replace human beings, but it all goes into regulation. So this is where Parliament comes into play. How is artificial intelligence used inside the society? To complement or to replace? And as a democratic country, I think the population would more favor to complement, not replace. But I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying this to also point out another fact, that also, even though jobs have quote unquote been lost within those couple centuries that I mentioned, there also was a transformation inside the job market. So yes, you have some industries completely being wiped out, but then there is creation of new things. So it's an opportunity for change. And change, like a tool, is based on how it is used. Does that answer your question?
The traditional farmers, they have been greatly affected, and we will have welcomed to something good. In fact, it's only good for them. Not until after the fact, you realize, no, this is not okay.
Yeah. So then,
we need to this road, we need to have the fourth industrial revolution, which is the air system.
yes, it is another industry. It's another type of revolution. And I get what you're saying in terms of positive and negative effects.
We can't be made to believe this will be good.
Pardon?
We can't be made to believe that this will be good. And after the fact, you see.
Well, as I
You have to be careful when we jump into this bandwagon. I mean, the world is becoming a smaller place. So you have to get it through the world itself. But other people be affected.
yeah, of course. Yeah. May I just answer? Okay. In the beginning of the presentation, I alluded to the fact that artificial intelligence is a tool and it could be used in either ways. It all depends on the people who are managing it. So we need to also adjust to the environment in order to be effective. We can? Yes. It does. when you look at some of the methods that you could go about, at first it may conflict. but then you have to put guidelines. So although there may be instances where this may happen, guidelines should be placed in afterwards when you see the effects. Yes.
First and foremost, let me tell you congratulations on the achievements that you've accomplished.
Thank you.
It's good to see one of our very own coming and giving a presentation like this. I think too many times we often expect that it's somebody, some great savior from outside who's supposed to come and deliver a presentation. Well, yeah. And especially as we like to say, somebody who got it out of the mud. Because you came during the police force as a constable, and you understand, it's not like you just came as some, as I said, great savior. You walked outstation, you walked in places that the average police started. And to be here today and giving this presentation, I think that says a lot and that means a lot, right? From my personal perspective, I first would like to ask if I can have a copy of the presentation.
Of course.
Because I see a lot of knowledge in it and not necessarily just applicable to the police force. My own curiosity and my own investigation into certain things could be assisted by this presentation. Following that, I just found out in your explanation that the top ranking officers are not here due to some unforeseen circumstance. Me, I would have rather seen this presentation be postponed because I think that is an integral part of the presentation. Because you look at the audience here, there's not a single person here responsible for policy, much less the legislation. So, and I go back to one of the sayings that you said, because it's one of my favorites. A tool is only as good as its user. We could have the most powerful tool if you don't have the authority to use it. What's the sense of it? So, I'm not saying as well too that the information is lost on the audience, but you want to deliver the information to where it's most applicable. In the absence of resources, efficiency is key. This is not the most efficient use case for that information. I'm not saying that it's not useful, but I'm just saying I would have liked to have seen, because we can't even ask, let us say, ACP or Commissioner, so what are your plans or how soon do you see this being implemented? There's not a soul who could answer to or give insight on the timeline that you outlined.
I am guided. Okay.
No, go ahead.
I'm guided by everything you just mentioned, and that's something I contemplated. But in the design of the presentation, it's not only for policy, but the demonstration applications. So, for example, with the two tools that I showed you, with the image recognition of objects, that could be used inside case files, whereby you could have a practical application in your everyday life. So if you have an issue, you can easily access those tools. And the other reason why I pointed out the photogrammetry is to allow you to explore tools that could complement your everyday work. So although it's not inside the end-term ideal policy to say you must use this, the presentation is delivered in such a way that you can explore and say, okay, what else could I do with it? So although all the hierarchy of the police force is not here, I still think it's positive that you all grace me with your time in order for me to share some aspects of artificial intelligence with you.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I'm not saying that, as I said, it's not lost on anyone. Because I believe there are persons who came with probably limited and no knowledge of the AI realm or the AI sphere and have now been educated or even motivated to go further. So I don't want to feel it to that point whatsoever. I'm just saying, effectively or efficiently, it would have been ideal to have that.
It would.
Unfortunately, that isn't the current circumstance.
But the most likely would be another meeting scheduled so that I could go through it again.
There we go. To just add on what Cummins and Thompson would have said, this is just my personal perspective as well too. There are certain things that are inevitable. They're going to come. We have to realize that technology, the term technology, sometimes we utilize it just to mean computers. But technology could have been to the man who was using a stone to pound something, a hammer. That was the new technology at the time. To us, that is primitive. But technology and life is always in a state of advancement. Another one of my favorite things is, one of the only constant things in life is change. Change is always going to be here. It's just a matter of how you accept it, you reject it, or how you regulate it, but just know change is going to take place. Just the mere passage of time, change takes place. 5 years ago, we were 5 years younger. Change has taken place. So it's just, oh? Well, you get to know, regardless. But what I'm saying is, it's not for us to fear something, it's for us to prepare and be able to guide it in a certain way. We live in the Africa, the Caribbean. Hurricanes is always going to be something that's unavoidable, they're inevitable. But what happens when a hurricane comes? Do we just go about our daily activities? No, we prepare for it because we know something is coming. We're going to take the necessary action to avoid the negative impacts, and where possible, the volcano grew, we could have gotten ash that could have been able to produce crops, etc. So where there's negative, we try to minimize it. Where there's possibly positive, we try to maximize it. And somewhere in between, you try to optimize it in the current processes that we have. So once more, it's good to hear this. I just hope that us as an organization, not just the hierarchy, but them for sure, as a part of the organization, as the executive branch of the organization, are receptive to, if not everything, but at least some of what you say. So there is that change that doesn't come and catch us by surprise. I'm hoping, I know sometimes we're a bit resistant to change, but I still like to be positive. And thank you very much once more for your time and delivering this presentation. That's all.
Thank you, Colonel.
So,
I think that we could do better than that and give it. Mom already said that some of us are very versed when it comes to technology. We are limited in our understanding, but I'm sure today we would have learned something that what AI actually is, the ability for a digital computer to control a robot to perform tasks commonly associated with intelligent being. So that simply means that a computer starts to do things that human beings we human beings normally would do. And of course, as he said, it's based on the data provided, and these computers can. And of course, we learned the two types of AI, narrow and general. And the narrow AI system is what he's really talking about, in terms of what we can use to enhance our crime fighting abilities, and also to assist us as police officers, as he mentioned. And that is something I think that we should pay keen attention to, these smartwatches that can detect certain changes in our bodies and send an alert, so that persons can say to us, listen, they see some alert, you need to check a doctor, this might be the cause, or this might be a problem, so that we can see signs of things like stroke that seems to be affecting police officers very often, through the stresses of our jobs. And of course, the general one, I think, is very scary, in something that people want to fear, in terms of the computer thinking like a human without any input from human beings based on the data provided. Now, these things are things that when I look at listen to these things, I'm looking at, I always refer to the Bible, Mr. Roache. I don't know if you're a religious man, but I refer to biblical things that tells me that while all these things happen, God is still in control. He just says that these are signs of the time, and Jesus will come again soon. I'm just telling you that. You don't have to believe it, but it's a fact. Right. The AI tool is a tool. That's your choice. AI is a tool that can be used, and it needs legislation to manage the way we utilize the AI system, as not to abuse it, to utilize people's personal information against them. It can be, Mr. Roache, I know it's your thing, but this thing can be like a powerful thing that some people might have a God syndrome kind of thing. Right, so we want to ensure that there are legislation in place that protects our human rights and our ability to function as a human being, rather than to be subjected to what other person wants us to be. And he spoke also about the system of statement taking, where the AI system can assist with one model. All you have to do when somebody come, you already take a burglary model, all you have to do is create the name, the date, and then we have a complete statement already taken. So instead of rewriting the entire thing, it's just some few changes that needs to be done in order to make our jobs easier, right? And we talk about, of course, the facial recognition and voice recognition system, which will also help us in our crime fighting abilities. As you will see, there are cameras going up all over Kingstown and so on areas to help, to capture a photo of somebody. But if there's a database that is linked to other, like say Interpol for instance, and our database with that facial recognition system can easily identify somebody, even though they are not Vincentian, who they are and their background. I don't think that for which the AI system will give, to us. And of course, we talk about the laws. When it comes to the court system, that the AI system, there has to be some level of changes in our laws to allow this system to be used in court. And he also mentioned the fingerprinting aspect. Even though we have to do fingerprinting here, when you go to court, you have to say it's been verified by 2 of our professionals, qualified persons, and the usual preamble for those of you who go to court. I am such and such a trainer, so I'm sure I will tell you. IT professional, I have trained in this and I have been qualified to give this and so on and so forth. The same system has to be done for the AI system in order for it to be implemented. But he also said something that is very interesting and important. That as police officers, we have to be careful what we share out there on social media. Because then these companies, and I'm sure we all have seen the algorithm. You just open TikTok or YouTube and you watch a video one time. The next time you open your YouTube channel, you see videos like that video popping up all the time. It's by design, so that the big companies can sell us stuff. So while the AI system and all, it has its good, and of course it has its bad. It has the upside and the downside. But I personally believe that it can help in crime fighting, properly managed, properly implemented, and it will be able to give us an advantage. Because there are criminals out there who are using the same system to commit crime. And it's time that we get on board as an organization. Personally, what you do with that, your own personal thing, that is up to you. But from an organization perspective, I actually believe that this system should be implemented to assist us in crime fighting, making our jobs a little easier, and helping us solve more of the crimes, especially burglaries, that they are about to, the mode of operandi. We can always take that. The AI system can type that in. One person commits a set of burglaries this way when the information is stuck. The next time this person commits a burglary, you can see can give a projection that this might be your suspect. It might be somebody else, but at least can give you an intelligent guess as to what. It's only the old police officers here talk with the mode of operandi. As young officers, some of you, whenever there's a criminal, yes, Tom, I can do just that. Whenever there's a crime or criminal committing some offense, you have to watch and the way they operate, the way they commit the crime. So if that crime happens again, especially when those persons are out of prison, you always have a suspect, somebody you can go to, and the AI system will help us with that. Yes, Thompson, see your hands was up. Yes. Simply criminal profiling. And if you ever watch Criminal Minds, I will tell you about the whole system of profilers. We'll sit down and study the case files. That is what the AI system now will do without the human element of it, I guess. Obviously, there has to be some input because you have to put in the data, right? So, all in all, Mr. Road, I want to thank you for your presentation, and my advice would be, so you're going to apply to the officers to do the presentation in their presence at their officers' meeting, and do your presentation there, and put it a little more in terms of the implementation part of it, the policies that they need to do to ensure that they adapt this and